Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Oh, man.
My Virgo brother. He was born on the same day, September 3rd as well.
Wait.
Is there a connection?
That is crazy. Yeah, I'm born on September 3rd. He's born
Really?
on September 3rd.
Oh.
Wax is born on September 3rd.
Yep.
Charlamagne's assistant was born on September
Paige.
3rd.
Yeah.
I think
One of my best
Napoleon-
friends was born on September 3rd.
Dr.
Napoleon.
Jessica Clemens.
Napoleon was born on September 3rd.
Wow.
Really?
Malcolm Gladwell, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Listen,
Thank you.
Malcolm has a new book out, man, and some books are good reads, some books are necessary manuals for the times that we live in, and that's exactly what I think Talking to Strangers is, man. A manual for the times that we live in. What we should know about the people we don't know. I think this is your best work.
Really? Oh,
I think so, first and foremost. But what is this book about?
It starts with the story of Sandra Bland, which is what inspired the book. And it ends with the story of Sandra Bland. And the middle is an attempt to figure out what happened. Because for some reason, I don't really have a good explanation why. Of all of those cases in that, I guess it was like a 3-year run where all those cases were in the news, that was the one that got me.
You used Amanda Knox, you used Brock Turner.
No, I'm talking about of all those
police
police
brutality.
cases
Got you.
from Michael Brown on. They were all horrifying in their own way, but that one, I could not get that one out of my head
Yeah.
because it was so. I mean, it's the middle of the day in a college town in Texas. A young professional woman driving down the street, pulled over for no reason, and then it just completely unravels.
Her first day there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
First day there, and the weird thing, of course, of that case is that we have the whole thing is videotaped, so there's no dispute about. Usually in those cases, there's a dispute. The officer says, "Well, blah blah blah," and the other person says, "Well." This one is like we know exactly what happened.
Right.
And so I decided, and I got obsessed with that tape, and I decided it's so weird to think that this completely trivial encounter could spiral out of control and end in Sandra Bland being dead 3 days later, that I decided it was sort of, and I also realized that encounter was somehow typical, that an awful lot of the big high-profile cases that we were obsessed with were all about the same thing, which is about strangers meeting each other and something going wrong and them misunderstanding each other.
Miscommunication.
So that's where the book begins.
You said that the death of Sandra Bland is what happens when a society does not know how to talk to strangers. Like, expound on that a little bit.
Well, so a lot of the what I'm focused on in the book is what are the ways in which we get other people wrong? What are the things that lead us astray when we're meeting someone for the first time? And then that encounter with the thing that becomes clear, particularly if you listen, the cop gives this deposition during the investigation. And it's totally weird deposition, but it becomes clear that he's terrified of her because he becomes convinced that she's dangerous. And he completely misreads what she is upset, but he completely misreads someone's discomfort and anxiety and anger at being pulled over as threatening behavior.
But doesn't everybody get upset when they get pulled over?
Exactly.
So
No.
wouldn't any cop feel like, I think nobody's ever really that pleasant when they get pulled over, especially for something that a lane change or whatever
But
it
he
was
did nothing wrong.
that she got pulled over for.
Yeah.
I felt like it was his ego because he
Yeah.
didn't like the fact that she lit the cigarette, right? And he didn't like the fact that she wouldn't get out of the car because it felt like his ego wanted her to just bow down to whatever it was that he was telling her to do, and she was challenging him.
Yeah. No, he very quickly gets in over his head. But he gets in over his head, I think, because he makes a series of very rapid assumptions about her that are completely false.
Right.
And it's that part of it. And also secondarily, that he's been put in a position, like if you go into that cop's history, you realize he was stopping everyone for everything. So this is not some random encounter for him. This is part of a practice, not just of him, but of police officers in general. There's a philosophy of policing that requires them to go out and stop anyone who looks even remotely suspicious on the off chance they might be doing something wrong. If you do that, you're going to get into trouble, right? You're going to put police officers in situations where they're required to make very rapid assessments of people that are going to be erroneous. And it's that kind of group of factors that interests me, and I think that shows up like Charlamagne was saying. The book talks about Brock Turner and Sandusky and Amanda Knox and Bernie Madoff. They're all versions of the same thing, which is people meet a stranger and they just totally get them wrong.
Right. You really liked Bernie Madoff.
Oh, I love that case. Is it's fascinating on so many levels because it's like super smart people, or people who consider themselves really, really smart, were completely taken in by him, which I just find kind of hilarious. Like, there's a certain superiority among people on Wall Street that you think they're above all this kind of stuff, and the truth is they're completely not.
Is that the fringe fallacy? Would that be considered?
Well, so I have a chapter.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6, which is I start with an episode of Friends, and point out that you can follow an episode of Friends with the sound off, because every single emotion that any character of Friends has is displayed perfectly on their face, right? And I had a psychologist who's an expert in facial expressions go through the episode, and if Joey is angry, Joey's face looks angry. If Monica is like surprised, her jaw drops and her eyes go wide. And if you watch things like that, you get the impression that that's the way the real world works, that you can reliably predict how someone's feeling from their expressions. But in fact, that's not the way the real world works at all. And this is a source of big trouble, particularly for police officers who have a whole series of things in their head about what guilt looks like, or what suspicion looks like, or what nervousness looks like. If you avert your eyes, an incredible percentage of cops think that if the person they're talking to averts their eyes, it means that they are hiding something or they're guilty. That is not what it means. On Friends, that's what it means. Right. But in real life, people avert their eyes for all kinds of reasons.
Right.
Sometimes, there was an incredible, do you remember that show? Remember Cops?
Yes.
Story, Cop, of course. There's a psychologist who does this hilarious study where he looks at like 4 years of Cops episodes. And because in Cops, you always know whether the person who's being interviewed is guilty. You find out whether they're guilty or innocent, right? Correct. So he looks and it compares the facial expressions of the guilty and the innocent people on Cops. It's real world. Camera's running. It's not in some lab. It's like, and what he finds is there's incredible differences in the way that guilty white people, black people, and Hispanic behave. And also incredible differences in the way that innocent white people, black people, and Hispanics behave. It's just different cultural ways of managing a situation when you're talking to a police officer.
Right.
But you can't have one fixed notion in your head about what innocence looks like if you're out in the real world where people are different.
At all, even if I know I'm not doing anything wrong and a cop pulls up next to me or behind me, I get instantly a little nervous.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not breaking any law, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm not on my phone, my seatbelt's on, all my paperwork is right, and I'm like, oh my God, they're about to pull me over.
See, and I'm the opposite. I don't get nervous at all. I get more aggressive because I know I did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So it's totally two different situations, you know?
I agree with you, but isn't that kind of dangerous on both sides? Like, because you can judge somebody off their demeanor, and a lot of times when you grow up in a certain environment, that is actually a survival tactic, because a lot of times you are correct about people. Like, you even speak about in the book how people, cops can tell when somebody has a gun on them.
Well, they think they can. I don't know whether there was one cop who was really good at this back in the day, but he couldn't teach anyone how to do what he did. So, I mean, I think there are very limited, rare examples of people who are good at that. But basically, I think a lot of people in these professions are just way overconfident in their ability to read people. And we have to sort of deal with that fact, I think, if we're going to prevent these kind of cases in the future.
They try to read behaviors. That's what they try to do. They try to read behaviors, but at the end of the day, on both sides, the cop thinks that they're trying to make it home and they're trying to be safe, so they're extra cautious. And a lot of times, we're extra nervous because we want to get home as well. You know, so it's hard reading people.
Let's talk about the Kansas City experiment a little bit, since we're on that subject. Because you talk about the fundamental misconceptions that police officers carry. So it's not an individual problem; it's a system.
It's a system. So this is something I've been like banging on for a while, and I thought of this. Actually, this is a little tangent. In that, when Donald Sterling is forced out as the owner of the Clippers, and it's because he makes those comments to his girlfriend, right, about how he doesn't want her posting pictures on Instagram. And Ramona Shelburne has this amazing podcast about the case. I listened to it, and I was struck by the fact that Sterling is someone who, over the course of his career, twice there were actions brought against him by the Department of Justice and because he was discriminating against black people in his housing developments, right, in his apartment buildings. The NBA doesn't do a thing. No one says a peep. Everyone's fine with it. Life goes on. And then he makes these comments to his girlfriend, and boom, the world blows up. And Matt Barnes, God bless him, makes the most interesting and intelligent point in the entire podcast. And he says, wait a minute, like, we knew about this guy for 25 years, and now you're getting upset? And it's this weird thing in society where the personal, if someone personally is racist, we go crazy. But if they are systematically doing something, we're like fine with it. Like it is 100 times worse if you don't let black people rent apartments in your building than if you say something racist to your girlfriend. Yeah. Just as like it is 100 times worse that there is voter suppression in Georgia than the governor of Virginia wore blackface. Like, who cares? I mean, are we really surprised that a middle-aged white guy from Virginia who was a frat boy in college at some point in his life was in blackface in the 70s? Yeah. I mean, that does not surprise me, right? Like, we got upset about that, but the fact that Stacey Abrams probably lost because of some really nasty, that's something that like fades away after. So there's this weird thing where stuff that's about systems just goes over our heads, and personal stuff gets us crazy.
We do that every day with Donald Trump?
We do that every day with Donald Trump.
Every single
day. Obsessed with with cops, the real issue with Sandra Bland is, I mean, it is an issue that this guy is a racist. The larger question is that there is a philosophy of policing that says it is legitimate for police officers to go everywhere, even neighborhoods where there is no crime, and stop people just because they believe in the back of their head there is a tiny chance they may be doing something. That's not something that individual cops do on their own. It is something they are taught to do.
Right.
And that part, that's the outrage.
Yeah.
Right? Who cares whether when this guy goes home at night, he has a Confederate flag on his wall? Right. The issue is that there's a system that is in place. And what I want to do with this book is kind of get our focus back on the systematic things that.
I agree with you, but when you take somebody who, when you have a system like that, but then you take somebody who may be a racist or maybe a bigot, doesn't it make them easier for them to, exert that racism and bigotry on people?
It does. But I don't know. I always run up against this thing with racism, which is, so some significant percentage of people, I don't know what it is, no one does, but are probably on some level racist. I don't know what you do about that, right? Like, I don't know how you get rid of them. I don't know how you change their minds. All you can do is you can change the system in which they're operating, or you can, so that their racism doesn't harm people as much.
Mm-hmm. And then also, like we were talking about this the other day, the whole situation with the woman cutting off the Kobe's dreadlocks, the young man Kobe's dreadlocks, and posting a picture of it, like, now you don't have these dreadlocks anymore, you can go out in the world and be successful, and that kind of positioning of it, and how we have to have actual laws where certain hairstyles, you're not allowed to now discriminate against somebody based on their hairstyle, because it used to be that somebody could not hire you if you had a certain hairstyle. Yeah. And I find that crazy. Remember the wrestling coach that made the kid cut his dreads off before the match?
In the match.
And the fact that that's even legal, or that he was able to do that, was crazy.
Yeah. No, the amount of time that's spent worrying about trivial things.
Like hair.
We care about the trivial aspects of racism, as opposed to the systemic aspects of racism.
The big, I mean, the Sterling thing, I can't get over the Sterling thing. Like, literally, like in the 80s, he settles with the Department of Justice over claims of discriminating against black people in his apartments. I mean, it's like,
didn't Donald Trump have the same situation?
Trump had the same thing.
And he became president.
Like, and that just kind of, you're allowed to go on with your life. And then and then the thing that brings him down is the tape of him talking to his girlfriend. It's just
that's why I get frustrated at Democrats, though, because you have Russian interference, which we know of. Mitch McConnell blocks an election security bill. We know about voter suppression, and everybody's just going on about their day saying, vote in 2020 as if our democracy isn't corrupted. But then they'll be mad at Trump for a tweet. Yeah. Like, it's weird to me.
Yeah. No, it is.
Why do we judge people based off just demeanor, though?
Well, it's a strategy that, so you do it with your friends because you know your friends really well and you know the idiosyncrasies of their demeanor. So I know, if I'm your best friend, Charlamagne, I know happiness looks like on your face. And maybe it's not smiling, and maybe it's the expression you have. You're looking at me right now with.
I'm extremely happy.
So you don't have that. We're very sophisticated with people we know really well. But the problem is when we meet someone for the first time, we have no experience with the ways in which they're. Like I tell a story in the book of my dad. Once he was on vacation with my mom. He hears her scream. He comes out. He's been in the shower, and he sees someone's got a knife to my mom's throat. And my dad looks at the guy, points at him. He's naked, 75 years old. Points at the guy and says, "Get out now." And the guy leaves. Guy runs away. My father must have been terrified, but he never showed any kind of emotion like that on his face. If you looked at him, you would have thought he was like about to track you down and throttle you. The guy was terrified of my dad.
Your pops was
It's
naked.
'cause he was
75 years old.
75 years
My
old.
brother Wax, he has a theory that nobody will fight a naked man. He said if you're ever scared,
Oh, really?
and
Just take off
all your clothes, and people will run from you.
That's
That
not
actually
wax.
is the
Wax
best.
out
That's
there.
the best explanation yet of this story.
Yeah.
But I put it, if you knew my dad, you would know that. If you didn't know him, you have no basis. You think, who is this psycho? Who is like, right? So the problem is we have a set of strategies that evolved to deal with our friends that just aren't useful when we're meeting someone for the first time. That's the issue. It's strangers are the issue.
Right.
And we didn't evolve dealing with strangers, right? We evolved in little small groups.
Well, let's
what
talk
about
about your experience with Bernie Madoff
Yeah.
and how you had to sit down with him and what your thoughts were.
No, I sat down with, not with Madoff, but with the guy who caught
Madoff.
Yeah, Harry Markopoulos. Yeah. Who is, I think it can be said, a very weird dude. So he's the guy who 10 years before anyone else figured out that Madoff was crook.
He knew.
He sort of, but the problem with this guy is he's this kind of, he's a hedge fund guy from Boston. He's super smart, but he's completely paranoid. And the reason he doubts Madoff is he doubts everyone. But my point in that chapter is you actually don't want to be that guy. You don't want to live your life thinking everyone is potentially
Bad.
dangerous or bad.
Yeah.
Or it's like, I think this guy, he strikes me as the most deeply unhappy.
But you don't want to be the opposite either. You don't want to be that guy that trusts and believes in everybody either.
Why not?
Because that's what most people get got. That's what most people get scammed. That's what most people get taken advantage of, I think.
I think you could use common sense, and I like to think that you trust people until they give you a reason not to. Some people look at it, I don't trust anybody until I know them better and I vet them out, and it takes a long time to earn your trust. But I feel like, okay, what you show me is what I'll take it at face value until you prove to me otherwise.
Yeah. I think I tend to err. I mean, you're right. You don't want to be completely gullible. There's some middle ground here. But I really think that happiness lies on I would rather be occasionally scammed and, trusting than be on the other side of the equation and be sort of paranoid. And,
Why?
Story of my life. Remember, you know how you always say to me, you'll give money to anybody or you'll do anything for anybody? It's because I'm looking at people that's good first.
But he gets scammed
And
a
if
lot.
they fuck
though.
me over, so what? That's on them.
He gets effed over a lot.
That's on
A
them.
lot.
I'm with Charlamagne. It's on them.
I almost feel like he likes getting effed over because he gets effed over so much. But
But I help a lot of people too. And
You
it's
do
like
help
it's
a lot of
way
people.
more people that benefit from the good things I do than people that
But there's
fuck
so
me
many
over.
people that he's giving opportunities to, or giving cash to, or money, or whatever, and a lot of them come back and bites him in the ass.
It's really not a lot in the biggest scheme of things.
But I mean, but it's a balance, right? So if you've been incredibly generous and trusting of a lot of people in the world, you've clearly helped a lot of people, and then you've paid a price.
Yep.
If you look at those two things, which is greater? Have you helped more people than?
Absolutely.
So it's like I'm with that. I think that's the way you have to live your life.
But one of those prices could have cost him everything.
How?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? This guy says anything.
No, not for that. There's one guy that really tried to ruin your career. A couple of them that really tried to ruin your career.
And they didn't.
But they had the opportunity. They tried.
So?
And it wasn't like it's just that I steal $100 from you. No, they
Yeah.
tried to destroy him.
What about, can
You
you
know?
judge somebody based off how they treat other people?
Well, so this is an interesting question. So let's say journalists face this question all the time. You're writing a profile of someone, and you have a choice. You can either interview the subject of the profile for as long as you want, Or you can never meet that person, but you get unlimited access to everyone in their life, all their friends, coworkers. Which do you, if you want to write the most accurate picture of this person, which do you choose?
I would say everybody else in their life.
Yeah, I agree.
That was the Hitler story.
That's a Hitler story.
Yeah.
But now, so what about this way? So let's say you're hiring somebody, and you have the same choice. You can interview the person you want to hire, or you can interview everyone in their life. Do you
I would
still
interview
do
the
that?
person I hire.
I think I would still go with everyone
You
else in
would?
their life. Yeah, I think that's a better shot at who they are, right? Because you meet someone for an hour. This goes to my point in the book. It's really hard to get to know a stranger quickly. You meet someone for half an hour in a job interview, and they are putting on their best face.
Absolutely.
They're not being themselves. But if you had unlimited access to all their former coworkers, old employers, family, they're going to give you a far more nuanced picture of that. I would even, I was this. My favorite example. This is a basketball story. Why did Seattle pass on Kawhi? Seattle had a chance to draft Kawhi, and they met with him, and he came in. It's a famous story, and he's super nervous. He's so nervous. There's rings of sweat underneath his. And the general manager of Seattle at the time says, "There's no way I'm going to hire some guy who's this. I want someone who's cool under pressure." But
Confident, right?
of course, Kawhi is the epitome of cool
of
under
that.
pressure.
Yeah.
It just so happened that in that context, meeting with the general manager of the team that was trying to hire him as a 20-year-old,
Why
he
wouldn't
got
you
nervous.
be nervous? Why
right?
wouldn't you be though?
Of course, yes, exactly. But so my point is that general manager would have been better off not meeting Kawhi.
Right.
You got all the tape you want. You can watch everything he's done in the basketball court. Why do you have to meet him?
Right.
I don't
Right?
trust people's autobiographies a lot either. Like when I read autobiographies, a lot of times I'm like, okay, because I do feel like people put what they want you to think about them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be, to not have, it's hard to be subjective when you're writing about yourself because you look at it from your point of view and then you're putting things out there and editing things that you don't want people to know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that's the fun thing in reading autobiography sometimes is figuring out all the things people have
But they've left out.
Yeah.
I like an unauthorized biography.
Yeah. Right.
What you talking about? You described the transparency problem. So that's what you're basically talking
Yeah.
about now.
Yeah.
What is it? The transparency problem?
Transparency problem is this assumption that we have that the way someone's demeanor or facial expressions are a reliable guide to the way they feel. So that Kawhi story I just told you is the GM's mistake is he thinks that the fact that Kawhi is super nervous in a job interview is a reliable sign of something in Kawhi's character. And if that is, in the case of Kawhi, of course, 100% incorrect. And you can't, as a general rule, you cannot jump to those kinds of conclusions because you don't know enough. Right? And people are, Amanda Knox is the same way. I have a chapter on, she's just someone who doesn't behave the way the media and the Italian police think an innocent person is supposed to behave.
Right.
Not because she's weird, just because she's different. She's like, not everybody has the same set of responses to a difficult situation.
Her chapter might have been the most interesting to me outside of the Sandra Bland stuff, only because when I read her behavior, I'm like, that is how an innocent woman would act, though. Like she would just continue to be herself, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
like when she pulled her pants on at the crime scene, she's like, ta-da!
Yeah.
Like that's what she always does.
Yeah.
She would always do that, innocent or guilty, right?
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is that she's in a different culture. She's in Italy, and she's kind of a geeky. She's young. We always forgot how young she is at the time. She's like, what is she, 19 at the time? So she's super young. She's from Seattle, middle-class girl from Seattle suddenly in Umbria, in Italy. Like it's this, she just got there. She's been there for like 3 weeks. I mean, so there's a kind of, the culture clash there is, and that's what she got caught in, that she doesn't know the local cultural codes. She doesn't know how she's supposed to be behaving. And they judge her for it. And they put her in jail for 4 years. It's kind of extraordinary.
Malcolm Gladwell got to go.
He got to go already?
9:15, they said.
Oh, Jesus. I do want to ask you.
I can go on a little longer.
Okay.
You discuss matched people in the Amanda Knox chapter.
Yeah.
And you say those people conform with our expectations. Their intentions are consistent with their behavior.
Yeah.
Why is this good or bad?
I don't think it's either. I just think it's a difference that some people you can read some people, right? There are some people who when they are happy look happy, and we all get those people right. but a surprising number of us just don't fit those simple patterns. And that's an issue for in these kinds of high stakes situations, like a job interview or a police stop or an
interview with Hitler.
An interview with Hitler or all of those. That was, yeah.
How was Hitler able to, like Hitler and Bernie Madoff, how were they able to convince people that they were good people when they did these horrendous things?
Yeah, so I was reading this biography of some guy who was friends. There's a guy who was a friend of Hitler in the early 30s. And he writes his biography in the 1950s, talking about when he was like, would hang with Hitler in Munich. And he's not someone who was ultimately a fan of Hitler's. But he says Hitler really was one of those people who was mesmerizing. I mean, he just had an extraordinary amount of charisma. He's one of those, even though he's a short little, not terribly attractive guy, particularly when he spoke, when he gave speeches, the whole room would just fall silent and people were just kind of focused and obsessed with him. Mm-hmm. And it is that quality, which is, what is it, 1 in 10,000 people have it. When you have it, you can go, I mean, there are actors who aren't terribly good actors, but they have that thing, right? And they're so compelling that we will follow them anywhere. And I think Madoff has a version of that. He radiates sincerity and thoughtfulness and there's, we're just suckers for that kind of that surface presentation.
Mm-hmm. Is there such a thing as a good person that does horrible things?
I would say no. I mean, unless I have to know the circumstance under which they do the horrible thing, but I would say that if you do good things, you are, by definition, a good person. I would say that.
Like you might have the drug dealer that gives out the turkeys and takes care of people in the hood, but they're still selling drugs to the community.
Yeah. Doesn't mean he's a bad person because he sells drugs, though.
That does horrible things.
Yeah.
Just because you sell drugs don't make you a bad person. It could be just your circumstance.
But you do horrible things. That's what I'm saying.
What's the horrible thing? Selling drugs
to people in the community.
I mean, it depends on their circumstances. Why are they selling drugs?
Right, so regardless of selling drugs, it's still not good for the community.
It's not, but that don't make them a bad person.
Correct.
That's what I'm asking. Is it?
I'm more, well, I guess one thing I think that there is, and this comes up on both sides of all of these arguments, debates, and controversies we have. I think that we need to back off on our judgments about people when they're young. Mm-hmm. So I really think this, when people, I thought about this I have a chapter on the Brock Turner case. So he's 18.
The fraternity party at
Stanford. He's an 18-year-old, gets super, super drunk, and he does something criminal and is punished for it appropriately. But the question is, when he's 35, do we still hold that against him? Or do we start to say in general of the whole range of all kinds of people who do something that they deeply regret when they're very young? Do we say, you know what, maybe it's time we were prepared to forgive people for even horrible, terrible things they do? Because being a young person dramatically increases your chances of doing something deeply stupid. Mm-hmm. And, maybe we should be withholding judgment about people until they are kind of fully formed adults. Doesn't mean we don't punish them, but it does mean that at a certain point we say, we're going to let you live your life as an adult without holding your youthful indiscretions against you, even if those are profoundly serious crimes. I think, the reason, for example, in this country that we put people in prison for as long as we do is that we're not prepared to do that, right? Other countries, if you look at the way that other countries punish even serious crimes, their sentences are a lot shorter for precisely this reason. They say, all right, you did something terrible at 19. You're now 30. We're going to let you start over. And I think there's something really important and beautiful in giving people a second chance. So to your question about the drug dealer, my question is, what does the drug dealer think about his drug dealing when he's 30? Mm-hmm. Has he turned his life around? Does he regret it? Would he do the same thing today? That's the issue. That's where I would judge whether he's a good or a bad person.
Well, Muhammad Ali said the man at 50 who's thinking the same way that he did at 30 has wasted 20 years of his life.
Yeah.
This is my last question. In chapter 12, titled Sandra Bland, you said we are inept when it comes to talking to strangers, and we think we can transform the stranger without cost of sacrifice into the familiar and the known, and we can't. Then you asked the question, what should we do? So what should we do when it comes to talking to strangers, Malcolm Gladwell?
There is no easy, first of all, there's no simple, this is not a book that ends with this kind of perfect,
No.
It ends in a pretty dark place. But I think we have to be a lot more cautious in the judgments we make of others. And we need to be a lot more humble in our understanding of how good we are at reading people. So don't jump to the conclusion when if Kawhi is sweating, you either have to follow up and ask him all kinds of questions and figure out, or you have to withhold judgment. You have to say that doesn't matter. I'm not hiring someone who does. Or if you're a police officer and you're walking up to Sandra Bland's window and you think you're faced with this behavior you can't make sense of, don't jump to a conclusion that she's dangerous and out to get you. Right? Slow down, ask her questions, be a nice person. I mean, this is simply the lesson of all this is that I don't know why we're in such a hurry to pigeonhole people and describe them and try and identify their patterns and behaviors.
Because I got to get these retweets.
Yeah,
I got to get these likes. Okay, I got to get these Instagram comments before everybody else. That's why.
Yeah.
So I got to jump to conclusions.
It's not healthy.
Listen, man, this is a great book. I think this is the second most important book I read this year.
Oh, that is.
Well, not second best, but I read two important books this year.
What was the other one?
Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Great read.
Yeah.
And this Talking to Strangers is a must read. So I think everybody should read it.
Thank you so much.
You think it's your best work?
I think it's my angriest work.
I didn't get that.
Oh.
I got concerned.
Yeah.
I didn't get angry.
Well, that's what I'm a very mild Canadian. That's what anger looks like in a mild Canadian.
Got you.
You can't read it the same way on him as someone else.
Exactly.
All right. Well, the book just came out, so we just got our copies. Thank you so much, Malcolm Gladwell, Talking to Strangers.
All right. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.